So I am filming this mostly for Nia, who asked to see my knitting technique. This is kind of a bastardized, weird version of halfway house between continental and English styles, because as a child I learned how to knit as a dyspraxic kid who couldn't manage to do the yarn holding it as my mother did, who was English style. So she gave up and just said, as long as the yarn goes in the right place, it doesn't really matter. I will slow down and explain once I actually get to the main knitting rather than the cable cast on, which is what I'm doing now. Or is it the lace cast on? I can never bloody remember. Hold on, try not to split the thread. Where are we on now? Let's get to 15. Another 2. I was counting 5s. It just makes my life easier. Because dyscalculia, which I can't even blooming say, is also, you know, a fun thing to have when you're a knitter. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to be doing plain stocking stitch. You might notice I don't actually hold the left needle the entire time. Or at least I do, but it switches hands. This helps me keep the tension nice and loose because I tend it to go way too tight. Others go too loose, so I find it gives me a happy halfway ground. Hold on, let's not get the 2 tangled up. There we go, and that's the end of that line. And the purl row, because stocking it was all. I always try and hold this tail out of the way in my right hand just because otherwise I will knit it. No one wants that. The first stitch is really easy to get way too tight, so I tend to keep that looser than I otherwise would. Again, I actually find purl quicker because you can see the way I hold the yarn. It's just easier for me. I could demonstrate the English difference between English and Continental, but I think that would just confuse matters. Maybe for another video. This might also be a slightly too large a needle. So I realise it's quite hard to see what I'm doing with this yarn, but I'm basically just holding it loosely in these fingers. It's not sort of... I've tried doing that thing where you wrap it around. That doesn't work for me. It might work for you. Give it a go. Oh, this has come up a bit slack because I'm focusing more on making sure I stay on screen. But you can see I can get pretty quick this way, but that's mostly practice. And trying not to split threads as well. Admittedly, this is a fairly splitty yarn. I'll show you one more row of purl, how I do it. And I'm going to slow right down there just for that last bit. Partially I help keep the tension in under my right thumb. I hold it there to keep the length right with that, and then I pass it to the thumb. In, around, hold it with the forefinger, and then pass it to the thumb. That stops my tension here from pulling too tight. Of course, if you have the opposite problem, going too loose, I suppose a similar thing might help. Because it lets you then pull tight without worrying about going too tight. So I hope that is helpful. That's quite loose knitting I've got there, but this is also quite big needle for a 4-ply yarn. But I do a lot of lace yarn, so lace knitting. So for that, you often do want a more spacious weave. There we go. That is how I knit my weird hybrid between English and Continental styles.